how does a colonial subject fight for democracy in this age of rising authoritarianism? Well, what Giovanna Negretti has done is she has taken the fight for democracy to the whole globe. She is the executive director of an organization called the Open Network. And it is a global network of organizations that use online tools to engage people at the grassroots so that they can stand for progressive values. I've known Giovanna for 20 years. I have seen her grow from phase to phase of her life. We have been in community in Boston together, part of the Latino and Puerto Rican community here. She's now based in Barcelona running this global organization. And this is a really beautiful conversation between friends that have seen each other grow, friends that have moved from a lot of like this kind of political, rigid knowing into a more open-hearted stance, friends who are concerned with the way in which we are so ideologically bound that we are not making room for what is most beautiful and most human in us. I enjoyed this conversation so much because it's a friendship that has been so long, because she is a fellow Puerto Rican and because that is so important to her. And she does talk about Puerto Rico itself, about her own experience as somebody with her roots in Vieques, about the Puerto Rican movements that are going back to the land today. It is wide-ranging, it is sweet, and it is full of wisdom. I know you're going to enjoy it. Let me know what you think. If you don't know me, my name is Gibran Rivera, and I am a guide, I'm a teacher, I'm a facilitator and a coach. And with this podcast, I am inviting you into a decentralized conversation with remarkable leaders who are devoting their lives to the evolution of consciousness and culture. Thank you for joining us. Your attention is invaluable. Hola, hello, Giovanna. So good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Thank you so much for accepting this invitation.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so special to be talking to you because your work has been so meaningful for so long, and it's unique compared to many other guests, or most of them, because I have witnessed your trajectory. We've known each other. I was trying to count. I think we're 2 decades into being in each other's spheres. So that is incredible, incredible. So I'm just excited for people to get to know you and the magic and the goodness that you are in the world. And
Thank you.
yeah, so
Likewise.
I just wanted to really thank you again for
Thank
saying
you.
yes.
Thank you for
And
inviting me.
yeah, I mean, why don't you? I do a formal introduction that I record after, but
Mhm.
why don't you tell us like what is the main identity that you're coming into this conversation with? There's so many things that you've held. I know that you're running an international organization right now. How are you coming into the conversation today?
Gibran, I'm coming in as a Puertorriqueña,
Always.
always. Una mujer puertorriqueña that's trying to do good in this world
Ashe.
and that doesn't forget where she comes from ever. So whether it's
Ever.
in the local sphere or the national sphere or the international sphere, soy boricua,
Amen.
100%, primero.
Oh, yes. I just
And
got
I'm
the
talking to
goosebumps.
another Puerto Rican.
That's right.
So, so
Every
I came into the space, knowing that we're both Puerto Ricans. That's where I'm
Amen.
coming. That's how.
Oh, I just got the goosebumps. I gotta tell you something funny because you've met Tuesday, and you know, I'm always rocking Puerto Rico. She like in one of our conversations, she's like, "Oh my God, we almost went a whole conversation without you mentioning you were Puerto Rican." and then she went to Puerto Rico. So she thought it maybe was just me. Then she went to Puerto Rico, and people in my family would compliment her, and they say, "Oh, you look so pretty. You could be Puerto Rican." So she came back reporting to her kids and her friends that we have a superiority complex. I'm like, is it a complex or is it just a fact that we're just dope, you know?
I love it. I love it. It is. It is. That's what it is. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I
and you're running the Open. Is that what we just call it? Open
It's the Online
International?
Progressive Engagement Network, but
Yeah,
it's commonly known as the Open.
beautiful,
Yes. Yeah.
beautiful. And another interesting data point about that is that I was around to facilitate the first convening of online progressive engagement networks, um, in the US.
That's right.
And then from the US, we did an international one. So it's just cool that I was kind of there
Yes.
long before you got there. Now
Yes.
you're there and you are just been there for how many? Is it 3 years now?
It's been 4 years now. 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah. Yeah.
What an important time to be doing
Yes.
the work that you're doing. And
Yeah.
a
Absolutely.
complicated one.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
And I have to say, it's I can imagine the dynamism with which you facilitated that meeting. I know because I hear it from the people who are still within the network and was there at that time, especially
Okay.
now because we're going to be 10 years old this year. So
Wow.
it's sort of like it's coming to a full circle, that moment in the US, was it Vermont, New Hampshire, somewhere up in the eastern
Yeah.
states, that you had this convening, and it was an idea, right? An idea, a thing that was just forming. And now that you, Gibran, get to see 10 years later,
Yeah.
from facilitating that group, as to what could be, envisioning what that could be, to 10 years later and seeing the growth and the development of it, it must be for you as a facilitator sort of like, whoa, wow,
Yeah,
pretty
it's
cool.
mind blowing, mind blowing. I wanna say a comment about the one we facilitated a couple of years back, right before COVID started. But I think it's a good idea to define what we mean by online progressive engagement networks because people
Yeah.
might not get what we're talking about. So,
Sure, sure, sure.
well,
Well, Open is a network of 20 organizations around the world using digital organizing tools to mobilize people from the ground up. It's people power. It's a people powered movement on a national level. It's like taking MoveOns or .org in the U.S., that model of digital organizing, online and offline mobilizing, to different countries that move or advance progressive causes in their countries, right? So it's very local, it's very nationally focused, local and nationally focused, and that's why it's different from Avaz and Change.org. It's just that it's nationally focused, and the membership, because all politics is local at the end of
yeah,
the day, really, and people tend to engage more, and also that it's for progressive causes, and that's really important. So we're dealing with and it's people power, so people get to choose the causes that these organizations sort of are dealing with on a daily basis. What we do, as Open, sort of the nucleus, the team that sort of runs this network, is really we provide the capacity for these organizations to get to the next level. And what's
nice,
beautiful, it's like a family. So we share tactics. Each group is sharing tactics and strategies and technologies of how to do things differently in your own context. So if a great campaign on healthcare has been done in Australia, the people from Sweden can take it, translate it, and the very next day run that same campaign. So you're not reinventing the wheel. So we do summits and secondments and all these. We have a library. We have all these opportunities for people to really share and strategize and come together to build a better world, a better country, and a better world
right?
with progressive value. And it's so fantastic. I got to tell you, when I got what Open is at my first summit. I started in March of 2019, and the first summit was in June. And I still couldn't get my head around what we were. And I when we and you would know this more than I would, Gibran, because you facilitated one of our sort of summits online. And So I came to, and I just realized, oh my, when I was there, it's like people, sort of the solidarity, the feeling of I'm not alone in the world doing this, and there's more people like me in different contexts, completely different contexts, doing this work is something very powerful,
Yeah.
especially at this time where there's shrinking space, where the rise of the alt right is has been tremendous.
Yeah.
Where what we read every single day is, the disinformation, all of that is really influencing the way people are shaping their ideas, and the polarization. It becomes lonely,
Yeah.
especially during COVID.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and the past few years have been quite lonely for a lot of people to have a sense of what can I do to shift this negativity. And our groups have been really amazing in doing that. So I'm pretty
Yeah.
proud.
That's great, and you should be. You should be. I know that summit, it was the first trip that got canceled when COVID
Yes.
hit. Like for, I think, for many, certainly for Tuesday and I. And so it was also an extra it was a challenge in many ways, in that we were translating to Zoom for the first time,
Hmm.
and that it was so many time zones, right? So it was wild in terms of what we were trying to do. It was
Mhm.
courageous, and it was wild, and I thought we got great outcomes. And I think so much of
Yes.
it has to do with that authentic mutual care that you're saying, that sense of true solidarity. And I have like I'm gonna get to a personal question that I often like to ask at the beginning, but before I do that, something comes up, right? Because you said like Australia and Sweden, right? And so then you have Canada and the US, and you have
Mhm.
well developed, rich Western democracies. And I believe you have some African countries,
Yes, yes, yes.
right? And I believe you have India,
That's right.
right? And so you're talking about different arcs of democratic history,
Yes.
right? And yeah, I'm just wondering how. So at the same time, there is a global rise of the right? Like I have a friend, and I don't. I'm not sure if I should quote her, give her name, just because it was a personal conversation. But she's a known thinker here in the U.S. and a culture maker. She said these folk are having their Pan Africa moment. Like, how
Mhm.
like there was a Pan Africa dream.
Mhm. Mhm.
Instead, we're having like this kind of white supremacy, but it's beyond that, in that we have Brazil and the
Mhm.
Philippines and India, right? Like this,
Mhm.
like real, true, like populist nationalism on the right. Like, and so how do you contend with how this shows up around such different countries? Like,
Yeah. It's interesting. And it's a challenge, I have to say. I can't claim that we have it right, but I think we try really hard to ensure that the learning is really that everyone is generous in receiving and giving the learning. And there's a level of humility that goes into that, Gibran, because you have big organizations like in the US or Germany or the UK that have been established for quite a while and doing this thing. But then you have countries like either South Africa or India or now Brazil, that's part of the network, even New Zealand, where they're doing things in very innovative, different ways. In places like Hungary, smaller countries that have dictatorships, basically, Romania, that's where the innovation is coming from, right?
mhm,
Where the innovation of how to reach people in a way that they feel touched and that they feel like they can make a difference despite what's going on around them, right? Despite
right.
the conditions. But that an organization like Move On can say, oh, I can learn from that,
That's
right?
great.
Right.
That's
I can
amazing.
still learn from the indigenous communities in New Zealand,
Yes.
or the Brazilian communities in Brazil, or just now we just had an America summit for the first time ever at Open. We did an America summit, and we had Colombia, Mexico, Brazil, Canada, and the US.
Wow.
I got to tell you, that was one of the most amazing. I mean, the learning and the cross sharing of, just not even just learnings about the tax, the technical aspects, but I'm taught and the campaigning that was going on and the issues that were sort of the cross learning, the cross knowledge, but the cultural understanding and really deep sort of spiritual exchange that was
Wow.
happening amongst people was beyond the technical, was incredibly inspiring to me, right? And
Wow.
but that comes with people coming with willingness, with
Yeah.
openness to say, and humility to say, okay, regardless, we have something to learn here, and for our responsibility is really to create the conditions for that to happen.
That is so cool. That is so, so great. We should exchange some notes uh, uh, after, because over the years I've been running something called Solidary Labs, which
Mm,
is a gathering of human rights activists and artists, usually documentary filmmakers. And it happens in different Latin American countries. So we've done it in Mexico, we've done it in Guatemala, we first did it in Colombia, then we went back to Colombia and did Afro Colombia. And now we're going to Peru at the end of the year. We were going to be in Peru this month, but
mm,
because of the troubles there, we decided not to go. So there's probably some cross connection with the folks
yeah,
that you're working with. So it'd be cool to just kind of
absolutely.
exchange, tell you at least who's showing up to ours and see if your people recognize them. Um,
Yeah.
but I love the concern with the hemisphere. That's a cool
Yeah,
thing.
I mean, but I will say, as you know, I mean, it does come with some challenges, right?
Yeah.
And I think the awareness, being aware and the intentionality with
Mhm.
which we operate is key, right? For any
Yeah.
global organization,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Intentionality, awareness, and also sort of curiosity.
Yeah.
And I think when those three things are come together, then that's the secret sauce,
Yeah.
because
Yeah. Yeah.
absent that, then the space will not be as magical as it could be.
That's right. I can only no. I it is, which gets me to the next question, which is, it is all it can all be so fraught. Even so, for example, let me like lay this down so the question can be better understood. Um, a lot of what I do with the podcast and the newsletter and my facilitation, which I've gotten like just super selective about where I go, because I can't deal with what I have often referred to as like, you often use the word progressive, not progressive, movement fundamentalism, right? So, like here in the US media, it could be progressivism and wokeness, or what I call performative wokeness, can be really equated. It can be seen as the same thing, right? And I have almost all of the values that a progressive has. My voting record is very much on the progressive side. And it will continue to be. But I am consciously disassociating from anything that looks like cancel culture, or that, quite
Mm,
frankly, feels like the fundamentalist religious community that I grew up in.
yeah,
Like I am moving intentionally away,
yes.
right? And so another term for people that are trying to carve a new space is heterodox, as opposed, you know what I mean? As opposed to like, we can only believe this thing, and if you don't
Mm,
believe this thing, you're gonna be exiled from it, right?
right.
And so I imagine that at a global level, progressivism has different names. Like,
Yes.
right, exactly, it means different things. I can only
Yes.
imagine some like hyper fundamentalist person from an American context, as I know it best, showing up and talking to somebody in
Yeah.
South Africa, right? And like trying to impose
Right. Right.
this ideology, right? And so, like,
It
How
happens
do you do
sometimes.
it?
It happens.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and say it doesn't happen, right? I think I think the best we can do in these global settings, I think, is to name it when it happens,
Hmm.
um, provide safe spaces, and this you do well as a facilitator. You understand this more than anyone, right? Provide the safe space where people can find an outlet to express their frustration, right, in a safe space, and try to have measures to ensure that there's a conversation, that there's a remedy, that there's openness in having that out,
That's
right?
great.
And I think throughout the years at Open, some things have worked better than others. A lot of experimentation as to how this works. I want to believe and I want to think that in the last few years, we've been much more intentional about it and have been much more successful at it. But I will not here say or pretend that we perfected it. I
Yeah.
think it's really about, again, an intentionality coming into, in creating that safe space. So people come into it knowing that if something like that happens, that it will be dealt with in a way that is respectful, honorable, with intention and movement, and I think we're at that place in this organization right now.
Great.
But I
That's
think I've worked with other global organizations in the past. When I was in the Middle East, that I worked with the Quakers as the regional director over of the Middle East for a while. So I've been in that sort of global organization as well. And every organization, I mean, it's a continuous sort of it's a, the other thing that really helps is having your values very well defined as an organization,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And continue always having conversations about your values, just to
That's right.
recheck, right?
That's
Just to
right.
make sure, because people change,
Yeah.
organizations change, and we're a network.
That's right.
And as organizations change, you got to make sure that they're coming back to their roots, and
Yeah.
understanding where they're coming from all the time, because organizations themselves evoluciona, they
Yeah.
have these, shifts. So we have to continuously have these conversations to make sure that we're all on the same page. And when we're not, then we have to figure out what we're going to do about that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yeah.
And I keep teasing people about this question that I will ask you about your own evolution. But I think we're in a good flow here, and I want to say a couple more things. First, ask you a question, which is, did you get that that piece that was written by Maurice Mitchell of the Working Families Party? It's called Building Resilient Organizations, which is a total misnomer because it's really about this problem, right? Like this problem of Puritanism, right?
Mm,
I don't know if you got to it yet,
no, no.
but I think I'll send it to you. I'll share it with
Okay.
you because it could be wonderful reading for like
Yeah.
the international. I think he's coming from a power perspective, he's coming from a party perspective, and he's like just naming what is playing out and how it's holding us back. And it's one of the best articulations I have yet read. Um,
I have to say that I have a strange reaction to the word resilience,
yeah,
because I've been named that in the past a lot.
yeah,
And when I hear it, I
yeah,
feel, I have this strange reaction to it, because the first thing that comes to my mind is power and power dynamics
yeah,
and fighting, sort of like, sort
yeah,
of like, fighting pose.
yeah,
And because in order to, it just means that you're able to face the world in a combative way, in my mind, right? In a
yeah,
combative way, and overcome, right?
yeah, yeah,
Overcome challenges,
yeah,
which comes back to struggle. So
yeah,
and that,
yes,
not that it's negative or positive. I mean, I do understand sort of like the positive sense of the word, but when I hear building resilient organizations,
yeah,
again, it's really about, it's the power to overcome, but how about the power to be,
that's
or
it, that's it.
how about the
Yes, I
power,
do.
and how, and that is something that comes back to what I've always been talked about lately, which is really building infrastructure, building
Uh-huh.
strong infrastructures of organizations to be able to do the work, because we're always in poverty mentality, which
Yeah.
keeps us
Yes.
from being able to do the generous work that we need to do, right?
Sure.
And in the fighting mode and in the struggling mode.
That's
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, I don't know if that made much sense, but that's
It made all the sense in the world. And just to add one more layer to it, we're both Puerto Rican, and like that's the other often offensive part of this is like, oh, we are so resilient. Yeah, but like been squeezing every bit of us for 500 years. And fine. I'm glad we're still here, beautiful people,
yeah,
but let's not romanticize our resilience. Like it's like this something is unfair is going on, you know. So there's another angle on
I
that.
agree
Yeah,
100%.
and I think the worst part about the piece is the title because it's just mistitled, but it is
Yeah.
a wonderful, wonderful piece. I'll share it with you after,
Thank you. I look forward to
and
reading it.
also for the readers because of this concern that we're sharing. I feel like I feel like what is at risk is liberalism. And by that, I don't mean like liberals in the United States. I mean like liberal democracies. Like the
Mhm.
idea of what often people call it agonistic democracies, like a democratic process where no one is going to have the ultimate victory, where you're always going to be engaged in a contestation of power, right? And so when people start banning books on either side or banning speakers, right? It's like when things can no longer be said and valuable arguments cannot be had.
Yeah.
And oftentimes it's like us so-called progressives enforcing our ideology. It's like that's not a liberal value, right? And if we can have that among ourselves, if
Right.
we can have agonistic democratic debates among ourselves across nations, like we don't stand a chance. Like the authoritarian spirit will win on either side. I mean,
Agreed.
yeah,
100%.
it's
Yeah,
a real thing.
I agree.
And so, what I wanted to ask you finally about is because I often ask it very early on, and it's like, what is a belief that you have held close to your heart, that you've identified with, that you've either changed completely or at least hold more loosely? And I ask this precisely because of the conversation we're having. Because I want people to see that remarkable leaders like yourself wouldn't be here 20 years since we met if we hadn't changed. If we
Yeah.
hadn't like changed our mind about shit we thought was completely true. Right? Because
Yeah.
that's where the polarization comes. Everybody just bunkers down on a belief. And so I'm
Yeah.
curious, like what would you share with us?
Two things come to mind, Gibran. One is I'm not all that,
Wow.
right? So when you and I met, 20 something years ago, I mean, there was, when you're giving a lot of responsibility at a young age and a lot of attention, right, that you're seeking, you tend to believe what you hear,
Yeah.
right?
For yourself.
And you think you're bigger than you are, right?
Mm,
And I took myself too seriously, and
mm,
because of it, and made a ton of mistakes.
mm,
And I had to really learn humility
mm,
through many iterations of mistakes that I've made throughout my life. So that was one. I had to let go of my ego, right?
mm.
And that was a lot of work. It still is, I have to
Yeah,
say,
for
a
me
lot of
too.
work, because it was big. It still is at certain times, depending on who you ask. And then the other is, my brother died in an accident in 2011, and that was
Oof.
really hard. He was young. He was 39, and I used to believe up to then that God thought we were special because we had gone through a lot in our lives already. We grew up very poor, single mom, a lot of deprivation of a lot of things. So I thought that we had suffered everything we had to suffer.
Mhm.
And when he died,
Mhm.
very suddenly,
Mhm.
I learned very quickly that I had to let that, again, it was all about ego, right? That I had to let that go.
Yeah.
And that it was time for me to live the present and not take absolutely anything for granted. And and that was yet another dose of humility that I had to learn. So, and it's been a journey. It's been a journey
Yeah.
to both on a sort of spiritual level, but even the way I show up,
Mhm.
either at home or at work or wherever it is, how to be that strong, opinionated Puerto Rican woman, that wants to do good in this world and has her opinion, but also that has to appreciate everyone's voice and understand that everyone comes from a different place with a different background, and sort of respect that and honor that, and be able to have the humility to learn from that, even if it's diametrically opposed to my own.
That's beautiful. Both are so beautiful.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing that. It's very meaningful. Uh, I'll make a comment if you don't mind on each,
Yeah.
which is you must remember Elena Letona.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. She is a bit older than us, and just a wonderful soul who's done her own growth in the most beautiful ways. And she she talks to him. She just, she's really appreciative and very loving towards me. But she always reminds me of how, like, me and Guillermo will walk into a room at our, you and I are similar ages, like just the cockiest machistas in the room, and like we knew everything. And like I just remember people telling us how machista we were, and like we're like, no, we're not. Like obviously a feminist, because of my ideology, but you're not living it out, and just like that youthful arrogance, and I just remember, like, I have fallen on my face enough times and in so much the most terrible ways. And I remember, like, one of the worst times I just really, like, just fell on my face, just did wrong. It was like, how they say your life flashes before your eyes? For me,
Yes.
it was like the feedback I was flashing. Man, people have been trying to tell me this shit for so long, and I wouldn't learn it until I screwed up in the worst of ways, and like it just like making amends for that, and like trying to literally make my life, I feel, is an effort, to make things right.
I've
But I
seen you
really
through
get
that journey, Gibran, and I honor you for that because I've seen you, I've seen the growth
it.
incredibly, and I've seen that you've dedicated your life's work to doing that. It's very clear and it's very honorable, and I so admire you for the growth that I've seen in you. I mean, listen, um, another thing, we have, I'm not sure if it's about your journey, but I'll talk about mine. Forgiveness is forgiving oneself
Yeah,
for that arrogance, or that
yeah,
ego or whatever it is
yeah,
part of that journey,
okay.
learning, because if we're willing to we can't forgive others if we can't forgive ourselves.
Yeah, yeah,
you know
yeah,
so, and I think that's part of the journey. It's been so long, that Gibran 20 years ago, it to me is sort of like a ghost. Even,
yeah,
I see a new version of Gibran that I love, that I just, when I saw you doing the facilitation of our summit, I was like, wow. Every single day I was like, wow. And I was calling myself, I was like, did you see that? How did you do that? I mean, it was just, you have come full, and you're so confident and so caring and so loving and so present, that all just, that you had to be who you are today, you had to go through what you went then.
Yeah,
That's how I
yeah,
feel, at least about myself as well.
yeah, yeah. No, no. The thank you first of all, and it's a mirror, right? Similarly, the yeah, it's like I want to say softness in you, but there's this. It's not powerless. It's like it's like a strength that shows up that is complete and unfuckwithable. But there is this deep gentleness, and even a sweetness that pours forth that can only come from that self-forgiveness. And self-forgiveness have been essential, and it's interesting because it's humility, but humility is a form of really actually loving ourselves and seeing our own goodness, not the presentation of the image of what you think you have to be in the world to receive the sense of worthiness or the sense of status, but to actually see yourself and know I have goodness here,
Yeah,
and and that goodness can be transmitted to
yeah,
others, and that's just a beautiful thing to get to.
yeah.
It's a
And
beautiful
I
thing
think
to.
it's wonderful that we've both come to a place, Gibran, that we're continuing the work that we've always been doing, which is really at the service of others,
Yeah,
right? And I think that that comes from a unique set of values, and that we were both born Catholic. We came from
yeah.
very Catholic families. My mother, I know your dad, and I please say hi to him, by the way.
Come on.
And I come from a very Catholic family. My mom wrote a book on the Virgin Mary.
Wow.
So I come from a very Catholic background. Like, you wanted to be a priest, I wanted to be a nun. There was a moment until I discovered boys, but that's another story. But the thing
Yes.
is, yeah, we have a deep set of values that come from our Puerto Ricanness and
Yeah.
our Catholic upbringing. I think
Yeah.
that has evolved over the years to something else. At least in my,
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
I know for myself, it's evolved to something else. But that we can hold dear and use. You always coming back to service, that we're using to service. And it's interesting to being here today, 3rd of March of 2023, and knowing that we're still doing this type of
Yeah.
work, you know,
Amen. That's right. What a beautiful thing. What a
and
beautiful
it's
thing.
beautiful.
I love that you're going back to that, to culture and values and faith, because I've been through so many iterations of spiritual pursuit, and I grew up like deep in, like, like fundamental. It was as close as you could get to being like a Pentecostal in your expression. And my partner in work, Jade, tells me not everybody knows what that word means. It means like an expression of faith that's very like people are raising their hands in the air and dancing and speaking in tongues and putting their hands on others in prayer, and people are praying at the same time but with different words. So we would do that for like 2 hours before going to mass for like an hour, right? So it was like being evangelical and Catholic at the same time. Like the church was
Wow.
losing too many people, and so they like opened this thing called the charismatic renewal, and so
Wow.
it had like what was good about that was that it was very embodied, had a lot of
Mhm.
fire in it. What was bad about that is that at least as we practice was hyper conservative, and
Mhm.
mirrored a lot of like the kind of American evangelicalism that we see today. That's
Yeah.
hurting the nation so much. Um, but um, but it has continued to change, like as to into different practices, right? Like from the yogas to the specifically the tantras to the more shamanic path, and what I learned is that what I'm gonna call it God, that God's face seems to keep changing. And so I'm not gonna be attached to the face, I'm gonna be attached to what's happening. I'm gonna like commit to whatever's God wants to show me, and I'm just gonna keep letting go. But it's never been like a rejection of, right? It's like an
Mhm.
evolution, a transition,
Sí.
right? Right.
Ujú, sí, sí.
I would love to hear a little bit more about this upbringing that you've referred to. I do know, you've shared. I've known you for years, so I know some, but I know that you have roots in Vieques, right? Like,
Yes, that's
yeah.
right.
So
So
tell me a little bit more about that.
yeah, so my grandmother on my mother's side was from Vieques and from Esperanza, and her family when she was very young was evicted when the Navy came. You know, they were giving money out and forcing people basically to sell their land to be able to build the military base there, and her father refused
Hmm.
and went to jail for that. But they were completely taken out of the island. And when she was older, she went back. When she was able to go back and live there, you know, the rest of her life. And we used to go there every summer, and it's like a second home to me. I mean, I feel this is my sanctuary. This is my rock. This is my place to be when I want to be. This is where I go descalza, you know, barefooted, no makeup, you know, and just this is where I am with the wild hair and the, you know, and the freckles and all, you know, and it's where I am. It's my place. And, you know, from a very young age, I lived there until I was 6. So my father was the doctor, one of the doctors there. My father's from Spain, very little known fact. And he was the doctor there. And Vieques one of two. And people, you know, his generation still remember him as El Doctor, you know, from that time. But then you know, fast forward, my parents get divorced. Um, but I still remember my kindergarten there. My kindergarten teacher, her name was Miss Goyin, and my first poem, just to get a sense, my mom was very involved in the Puerto Rican independence movement. So that in and of itself in the 70s was a big deal, right? You know
Yeah.
how it was. If
Yeah.
you were involved in that party, you were sort of like, you know, blacklisted. You weren't, you
Yeah.
know, it was a very radical thing to do. And she, you know, people still remember her in the, you know, in the plaza with her, you know, banner and getting money in a can for the Puerto Rican Independence Party. And yeah, so my family has always been active in trying to get the U.S. Navy out of Vieques our
Mhm.
whole lives. But my grandmother wasn't, because she, you know, she kept saying, if you are going to be part of this independence movement, you're going to get in trouble, you're going to get to jail, you're going to, you know, that she was ingrained in that sense of, you are, you know, something bad is going to happen to you, right? If that happens. So she didn't participate until she was like in her late 70s, when this whole thing happened in Vieques in the 2000s, in the late 1990s, early 2000s, when David Sanes dies and the whole island starts this whole movement to stop the U.S. bombing in Vieques. And I was very involved, as you know, in the U.S. to get
Yes.
Bostonians involved in this, and massive demonstrations. We all got arrested. It was fantastic. But she for the first time started going to protests, and she
Mhm.
for the first time, which really taught me the power of learning, that you can learn and you can change at any point of your life. She was in
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s, and she, for the first time, voted for Rubén Berrios in the Puerto Rican Independence Party at that
Wow.
age, when she was like a popular her whole life, right? Like Popular
Uh-huh.
Democratic Party, because she was afraid, she was leading with fear. So, but she came into her own, and I am so proud of her to be able to
Yeah.
be so big, to be able to do that. She died during COVID, unfortunately, at
Wow.
96, I think it was. But she was a tremendous influence in my life in that sense, as is my mom, right? So we have always been so pro independence sort of supporters, and also, you know, getting so Vieques is a very special place, and getting the Navy out of Vieques has always been sort of front and center of my life still till today, you know, because now they're gone, but now we have to clean the place up and
Yeah.
get some economy going in the island. So I'm very supportive of all the efforts there as well.
Mm.
So yeah,
Thank
Vieques
you.
is a special place, special.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you for the faithfulness and the commitment to our people. And I think I've heard it said that we have been the only people that have successfully evicted the Navy from
Yes,
anywhere. And
true.
that's a big deal. That's a
I
big,
was
big.
there on May 1st, I think 2003 was it, when they finally came out, left, and it was 12 o'clock, and that was the time that they were supposed to be like gone forever, and they opened the gates, and they swung open the thing, and people were crying.
Yeah.
People, particularly the older generation that remember the rapes, right? That remember they were on their knees sobbing because of the significance of this. And I remember when people were saying on the stage, "Primero Vieques y ahora Puerto Rico," like people saw this as a moment of national solidarity. Like if we can do this here, we can do this for our country. It was a very big, and people believe that at that moment in
Yeah.
time. It was just a very, I will never forget the particularly the women of Vieques, the
Uh-huh.
women that were cooking every single day for years for people to go into those camps and do the civil disobedience. They were the ones who were cooking and taking the food and just singing and chanting, and it was just it was an amazing time. And for a poor community as Vieques to be able to rally the entire nation inside of Puerto Rico and outside, to be able to free themselves from the oppressor in that way is just it's the moment of my lifetime, I have to say. It was and
That's
just to be
really,
part of that and witness that, it was beautiful.
that's really beautiful. That's really beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for the gift of your attention. If there's something here that resonates for you, something that feels true and good, think about a friend that you could share it with. We curate for each other, and that's the only way the good stuff spreads. I want to tell you a couple quick stories, and then I want to ask you, uh, yeah, what is your perspective on Puerto Rican movements now, and where we are, where they are, we, they, depending on. Just thinking, always trying to respect the people that are living on the island. That's the only reason why I say they, even though I know we're one people. Uh, but but just a couple of stories. I had the privilege of going to this elite graduate school called the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, and the school had it was like less than 200 students, I think, maybe even less, but it had like this three kind of tracks. It had like the track of people that kind of had come out of the Peace Corps and were very concerned with development. And it had the track of people that were into international business. And then it had this national security wing. So like the dean of the school had been, when I was there, had been the commander of the NATO armed forces in Europe during the Cold War. And I told my son, we talk about like different, like I try to live life without too many regrets and keep growing and learning from them. But I do regret not getting to know the people from the military folk. Like I feel like if I had gotten to know them rather than reject them, I would know so much interesting stuff right now. And maybe even have friends in places that I would never uh, associate with, and I still probably don't. Um, but I gotta tell you, that was one reason. Might simply be that it was during this struggle, and I was in the hallway talking to this Texan officer, high level officer from the Navy, and he just said in the most, he was much older than me, he said in the most nonchalant way, like, "Oh, I shot Vieques 1,000 times."
Mm.
And he was trying to explain to me how important tactically Vieques was for the Navy. And he's like you could get so much more money out of us, if you played your cards right. This is from his perspective.
Oh,
Like
that must be a hard
like
conversation
we
to hear for you to hear. Yeah.
so it just like then it might have been a little hard for me to make friends with those guys, but but just interesting. And you're
I
talking of.
gotta tell you, Gibran, you reminded me of something. I can't believe how we have similar experiences on this. I mean, we should talk more for sure. I also went to an elite school. I went to the Kennedy School, and there we had a class. I'm sure you're familiar with Ron Heifetz and his adaptive leadership sort of
Yes.
methodology. So I did that. And there was this one guy, and there's always someone in the classroom that sits right at the top of the forum, like, and he's so tends to be the most, vociferous guy. And he was from the Coast Guard, and he mentioned in one of his things about Vieques in the middle of a class, and I had a visceral reaction to. I could not look at him. I could not. I mean, the anger that I had every time I went into that classroom, every time he spoke, his voice, everything. And one day I just went up to him in the forum, who was having his coffee, whatever. And I brought a picture of my grandmother and I put it right in front of him. And I said, now, how would you like, someone bombing your grandmother's backyard? Would you like that? Like that?
Right.
And how safe would you feel, right? Because he was saying that he did all of this because it was for the safety of the people. He didn't understand why the people of Vieques were not appreciative of their efforts. But you know what he did the next day? He
Yeah.
brought me a picture of his kids, of his two
Wow.
girls, and he sat next to me and he showed me the picture of his two daughters, and he goes, I do everything to protect their liberties, their freedom. That's what makes me do what I do.
Wow.
And that started a whole conversation about our values and what leads us to do what we do,
That's
right?
right.
And also sort of like understanding the perspective of where we're coming from, right? So
Right.
he had a deep it became personal.
Yeah.
And that was one of the most profound moments for me at the Kennedy School, because we were able to translate that moment into a moment of understanding, of shared value, of understanding shared values and understanding perspectives in a different way, where you de-villainize
Yeah.
the oppressor, right?
Yeah.
The oppressor. But the oppressor de-victimizes the victim. So you're
Yeah.
equal. You're on
Yeah.
equal standing talking about a situation. What that opens up is for possibilities. Now, we're not best
Yeah.
friends. We're not blah, blah, blah. But there's the doorway that happens, right?
Yeah.
That, there's an open door that happens that opens up that possibility of X.
Yeah.
That was a huge learning for me. Um, you know, because of what you said, right? When still till today, when I talk to anyone in the military, I have to, like, my the hairs on my back of my neck just like cringe. But then I remember that moment, right? And
Yeah.
say, okay. And it's given me sort of like the sort of the reminder that I have to stop and reassess and not
Yeah.
and give opportunities. Now, yeah. So anyways, that reminded me of that story because it's
Yeah.
very similar to yours, right? And
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because that you're just getting right to that place where I'm trying to invite anybody that's in relationship with me, particularly through this platform, which is what I was saying earlier, like liberalism and agonistic contestation. Like,
mm, mm,
and so, like, just this morning I was reading a piece on, like, how when you read the data, we are each side is completely dehumanizing the other
yeah,
and overestimating, like, basically the most vociferous, most extreme voices on either side are understood by everybody on the other side to be how the other side is, right?
yeah,
And like, most people on the right are not like the worst of the right, and most people on the left are not like the worst of the left, right? But if like, if we are even, once we dehumanize the other, once we think this person is an existential threat to my very existence, in, we can't get there. Now, some people is like bombing your island. That is an existential threat, right? And
Yes.
that
Yes.
demands a contestation of power, right?
Right.
But the room for conversation in between is like my brother was saying, like we are like on our phones seeing everything that is going wrong and the way the world is falling apart. But if we look at our windows, not everywhere, not all the time, but certainly for people like you and like me and like a lot of people listening, when you look out the window, there's still trees, there's still grass. Right now, here, there's rain. And it's like, I gotta move. I can't forget the devastation that is happening, but I gotta move towards it from a place that is aware that life is life, that aliveness still thrives, you
Yeah.
know? And like
Yeah.
that just opens the heart in a different way. It just
Yeah.
does.
I
Just does,
agree. I
you
have to
know?
say, one of the things that I've learned more, because, I'm like you, uh, I'm an organizer, I'm an activist, I'm an advocate. But I've never really, and I'm an electoral campaigner, I've done all of that. What I never did was digital campaigning. And there's a science behind all of this thing about digital campaigning, which I really love, that I've really loved to learn about, which is really about developing messages in a way, conveying messages in a way that is inclusive, right?
Yeah,
That you can feel a part of, that you
yeah,
can feel, and it's instead of dividing, instead of being a divisive force, which it can be used for that, right? And a lot of platforms do that, right?
right.
But in us, in our groups, what we're seeing more and more is using, you have, I don't know, 16 million members. And we have the capacity now through technology to really um, study what that membership is and divide them into these groups, right? On the back end,
Yeah,
and we give a message to folks depending on what we know through testing that they can hear up to where they can in their
right.
progressiveness. Because we understand that
That is
there is
awesome.
a gamut of
That
what
is
progressive
beautiful.
means, right?
Right,
So the message or the themes or the issues that we're going to be sort of targeting certain segments to is going to be different.
right.
But in the name of being able to ensure that everyone can participate, right,
Yeah,
on the
yeah,
issues that they care about.
right.
And that to me is just, there's a beauty to that, right? There's a
Yeah,
beauty, and sort of a dynamism to that is really, that works really well. But what's happening in the world, Jivan and I see, is that is being sort of attacked through disinformation, right?
uh-huh.
So, right.
Yes.
So then that you try to develop these messages, but then people are seeing 10,000 messages on their phone, or they're, telling them another story, but 20 times more, because the algorithm that they're in tells them the story, keeps telling them the story that they need to hear, which sort of makes our job as digital organizer harder, right?
Much harder.
Because we're on the defensive. We have to continuously try
Yeah.
to fight against sort of the voices on the side, right? And
Yeah.
testing and testing and testing. And the good news is, I think, is that it's effective, and also it can be effective, is what I'm trying to say. But also that what I'm seeing, right, as well, is that because there's so much disinformation, we still use the digital organizing, but a lot of groups are going back to the grassroots.
Beautiful.
It's all coming back to you
Yeah,
and me, because
that's
I
right.
know you, and you're going to talk to five people that you know, and I'm going to talk to five people that, it's like a domino effect. And it's all coming back to people,
Yeah.
person to person. So,
Ashray.
and what the digital tools do is help enhance that, to, make that happen better,
That's right.
instead of being the sole place for that to happen, as
That's so
it was
beautiful.
before, in the
That's
early
amazing.
days of digital organizing. It's coming back to people, and I think that's really exciting,
Yeah.
to that connection that's
Mhm.
happening. But I think COVID had a lot to do with it too. I think
Yeah.
people are just tired of being online,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So it's got a good silver lining effect to it as well. But I hear you in the polarization. Yes, yes, and it's going to take a while for us, I
yeah,
think, to for all of us as progressives to figure out the polarization within us, because there's a lot of polarization within the
yeah,
progressive movement. I remember, and that hasn't changed from when you and I, you're
yeah,
not Republican enough, you're not progressive enough, you're
yeah,
not, you're an advocate, you're not an organizer. I mean, the judgment behind the value systems, we just judge so much our
yes,
own, right?
yeah,
That it becomes unbearable. It's very tiring.
yeah,
So we need to start nurturing. That's where your work comes in so profoundly, Gibran,
mhm,
because I think the work that you and Tuesday are doing, and in that, which is the infrastructure that you're building, so that people feel and understand the importance of doing away with the judgments, doing
yeah,
away and focusing more on the connection
yeah,
is truly very important. That's not something we do. That's something,
yeah.
that's your mission, that's your purpose, that's
That's
the
right. That's
thing
right.
that you bring to the world, the light, the torch that you were
Ashe.
talking about
Mm,
earlier in your before we started this thing. You did a little invocation and talked about the torch that we're carrying to build forward a
yeah,
path, and that just resonated so much with me, because I have that in connection with you and with
yeah,
Tuesday. I think it's just beautiful. We're doing it in our own ways, right?
yeah, yeah. It's beautiful. No, I can totally feel it. Everything I'm hearing about what you're doing, I got goosebumps. I can really feel the way it's working, and I just love where you took us with this idea of going back to the grassroots, because I've been thinking a lot about it. I've been thinking about how it's only gonna get harder to know what's true. With AI, with deep fakes, right?
Yeah.
I I read the New York Times faithfully, and I it's like a it's like a almost like a bad habit. Like I want to just read less of it, and I shouldn't tell people my password for it, but my password is elite propaganda. And then I got some numbers
You're
because
so funny.
it's like yeah, it's a more valuable source of news than most. But then you can feel it. You can feel how it's used. You can feel how the reporters are living on Twitter.
Yeah.
It's just like it's. And so to me, I just keep thinking about somehow we need to find people we trust. Like it has to be a network of humans,
Yeah.
right? Where like you like because right now it's all so big. You gotta just people are so exhausted with over information, with overwork, with over everything that they gotta choose one side or the other because they just don't have time.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm this or I'm that. There's no
Hmm.
nuance, right? And somehow it has to be relational. Like, okay, like these are good people. All right. So it's also like, do you feel the kindness? Do you feel the compassion in the other, right? Like, to me, if you're out here like full of panic and hate for somebody, even if it's the opposition, you become less trustworthy to me, right? And it's like a part of one of my ongoing theories or beliefs, truly, is that modernity did away with mythos. And mythos is how we make meaning. And so modernity made it so that our stories, our mythos was either a fundamentalist truth. The world must have been created in 7 days, and there must have been a global flood, and Noah's Ark can be found on this mountain. Or a scientific lie, or all of it is a lie, as if our ancestors of all peoples didn't understand that the mythical is a true realm, but a different realm, right?
Yeah.
Like we were sophisticated enough. Like I don't believe the old Greeks would think if I get out to Mount Olympus, if I can literally climb it, I'm gonna see Zeus throwing down thunder, right? Like people are more sophisticated than that, right?
Yeah.
These are stories, and
Yeah.
and so absent mythos, away from meaning, we substitute it with ideology.
Right.
And ideology is heady, right? And it's what we call like propositional. It's like my proposition versus your proposition, right? And all the fighting is happening at this ideology. And so if your ideology is supplanting your mythos,
Mm.
it's not teaching you how to be a good human being, right? How to care no matter what somebody else believes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
How to be kind, how to be compassionate, right? Like how to do all of the things, right?
Right.
It's just teaching you that this is what is right,
Right.
and you might be right to eliminate somebody that that is of a different ideology.
Yeah.
So is somehow we can return. So part of my own change is at some point over the last couple of years through a miracle, through the healing work I've been doing, it's like a somehow striving dropped as a thing, right? Like I still want to do great work. I want my work to be known enough for me to get more of the clients that I want, but I don't feel like the only way to measure my success is by attaining a certain scale or level of recognition, right?
Mm.
And
Mm-hmm.
there's all these people that I admire that I'm like, well, they're doing this at such a higher level. And it's like, just kind of relax. And like, we do these circles with 10 to 12 people, and we do a night of healing or 5 days of transformational work. And that might be, the 5 days might be 24 people, whatever the number is. And you have a trust and a belief that something from there will keep moving on. Like if
Yes.
you light the spark, or
Yes.
the spark is lit and it sees it and it recognizes itself in the other, then
Sí,
it
sí,
spreads by itself. You don't have to
sí, sí,
fill up
sí,
a
sí.
room with a crowd. Like a,
Exacto.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you
yeah,
know, I agree. And that's it brings me back to the open summits and the cohorts and the
yeah,
meetings that we have, because that's how I see our work, right? In terms
yeah,
of lighting that fat fire that you're talking about. If we can get people together to learn from each other and build solidarity and share knowledge and share techniques so they can create change within their own context and their own countries, then my work is done, right?
yeah,
That's what fuels me, because you know that what you're doing has like this domino effect that's
yes,
affecting hundreds, if not thousands, if not millions of people, right?
right, right,
And from your vantage point, and that's just it gives you a sense of purpose that is meaningful, and beautiful, right?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Fulfilling.
Yes.
I,
Fulfilling.
I will move us towards the two closing questions that we usually ask. But before we do that, I'll remind us of the Monty Python movie, The Life of Brian. I don't know if you ever saw it, but
No.
Palestine, like Jesus was born into an age when there were many messiahs because the people were oppressed by the Roman Empire, right?
Yeah.
And so they make fun of it because Brian is basically living like they're taking his life. It's a Monty Python. It's hilarious, but but they have these rebel groups, and it's like the the Front for the Liberation of Palestine versus the Palestinian People's Liberation Front, right? And then there's a third one, and it's just like that is the story of the left, right? Like it's just like
Yeah, 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 yeah,
and it's ridiculous.
yeah,
It's
yeah.
ridiculous. It's
It's
just
so
like
true.
you could just
It's
laugh
so
at it.
true. I'm with you. I'm with you. It's so true. I agree.
So the the questions. I'll ask you two questions and then invite you to say anything you want to say for closing. But one of them is, with your consent, I like to invite the person I'm interviewing, in this case, Giovanna, to see if you can take a time travel to 20 years from now.
Mm,
and to see yourself 20 years from now.
mm,
You have attained certain things, you have not attained others, you have failed at others, you have grown in certain ways, and some of your human foibles are still a problem. What a human life looks like, you know? But no matter what, you've grown in wisdom. And we know that because this is how you engage your life. And rather than describing yourself in 20 years to me and to us, I want to invite you to return back for that person that you have become 20 years, that wisdom, to come back to you now.
mhm,
And what would she say to you? What would she tell you that you should know and remember about how you should be over the next 20 years?
hmm. Well, wow, that's a deep question, Gibran. Wasn't expecting that one. Um, I let's see. That person will me. I would probably tell myself a few things. One, I told you Puerto Rico would be free.
Shit.
Um, but she would also say, um, "Thank you for doing all the work that you're doing. It means something, and
Mm,
you're making a difference. Um, and the world is a kinder place because of your work."
shit. That
Yeah.
softens my heart. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
response is absolutely beautiful. Um, yeah, one of the things I did for my birthday last Tuesday was I put up a picture of old me. Like there's a filter where you can make yourself
I
old.
saw that. That was so
Yeah,
cute. Oh my God.
I'm like, let me get that wisdom now. You know.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd like to ask that question. I said two questions, but your answer reminded me of um, of one that I didn't get to. So if we can do it a little
Sure.
briefly, but just the essence of it. Like I got to facilitate some years ago during COVID this this forum between Puerto Rican organizers in the diaspora
Mm,
and Puerto Rican organizers in the island.
mm,
It was fascinating, you know, fascinating. Uh, and then got to spend a little bit more time with Puerto Rican organizers in Puerto Rico, and just beautiful stuff. And also like stuff that's younger people do that I felt a little older and a little more like, oh wow, like there's some stuff I'm not understanding, but this is the energy that we need. So keep going.
mm.
Uh, but I'm just wondering if you have an opinion or a thought or something you would offer to the Puerto Rican people, the Puerto Rican movements right now. Like, what are you seeing that's inspiring you, or
Oh,
what would you say we have to remember?
yeah. I'm in awe of the young people in Puerto Rico who are waking up to a new and sort of approaching Puerto Rico in a new, very sort of dynamic and conscious and profound ways in terms of bettering Puerto Rico, going back to the land, doing
Yeah,
agriculture, right? Going back to sort of housing issues, advocating for the anti-privatization, so that our beaches are not privatized, so that, and these are the young people that are leading it.
yeah,
And in the last elections, as we know, I mean, a massive amount of young people went out to vote, and the pro-independence sort of parties got a massive amount of the vote for the first time in decades. And so I guess my words would be, keep up, keep
uh-huh.
up with this. We believe in you. We need you,
Yeah,
and use us, the people who continue to fight for this as well. Don't exclude us. Include us in these movements as well, because we can also help in many ways. So I think that's what I would say. I think there's more acceptance of the diaspora than there was before, right? There
great.
was an us versus them. be us versus them mentality. There's still some in Puerto Rico of yo no me quito, right? Like
Yeah,
of the people who left to Orlando or to Florida or to US when Maria happened. But I think, that I'm hoping that people start, especially the young people, start putting that aside and
yeah,
returning to what is important, which is the economic, social, and political sort of stability of our island, and the belief that we can, that we
yeah.
can, that we can. And when I mean we
Beautiful.
can, is that we can be independent, that we can have agriculture, that we can have a sound economy, that we can deal with the housing crisis, that we can,
Yeah,
and we will.
that's beautiful. That's great. That's great. You know, um, two things I'll say. One is one of the summits I did. I saw a tank top. Puerto Rico is a warm land. This very young man had a tank top that had the words on it, "Pateria en resistencia." And I'm like, never in my when I was never would that have been possible. Pateria is a Puerto Rican term for queerness. And just to like proudly rock it, it's like just a world apart from my own,
Oh,
just
yeah.
so beautiful. And then when I went to Puerto Rico the Friday that Trump got elected. So Trump got elected on Tuesday. I already had a plan to go to see my abuelo who passed right as COVID was starting. Just my hero, my ancestors. He's shown up in my dreams a couple of times.
Oh,
I just love the man, and it was great to go because I was able to dunk myself in the Caribbean waters. I was able to fall in love with reggaeton again after kind of moving away from the genre, and I haven't dropped it since then. And then I saw my grandfather, who's been through the Great Depression and the Second War, and went to Korea, and he's like, "Don't despair," Right? But then he's also seen Puerto Rico go through the arc of like entering, touching the middle classes, going from the campo to having a post office job, which gave him a federal salary, and being a soldier for 20 something years, and then seeing that fall apart. And he said, like, man, when we had the Great Depression, at least we knew how to plant yams and how to fish.
yeah.
And like to have the young people reclaiming that knowledge. Like what people don't know, or listeners, is that this is some of the most fertile land on planet Earth.
Yes, yes,
And that because of the development model that was forced on us,
yes.
we are not self-sustainable with food. And that's a crime. That's a crime when people cannot grow food in their own land. And
Land.
it's such a powerful thing to reclaim. I'm glad you brought that in.
Mm.
Um, the last question for you, Giovanna, plus anything you want to share that I haven't asked about, ways to find you, um, follow you. But the last question I always ask the powerful women or non-binary people that come to the podcast, which is in this world, kind of this post-Me Too world where the horrors that you have always known about uh, were exposed and had to be contended with, and just like patriarchy, right? And it's something I've been really working on with the Better Men Project, and I always ask, in your opinion, like, what advice do you have for men? What should men do to become better?
Oof, that's another one. All right. Yeah, that's a good question. Hmm. Listen, huh, I have a wonderful husband who's
That's what.
Australian, and I grew up Puerto Rican, as you know, and I've had my relationships prior to my husband have been Latino men, right?
Mhm.
So I had Latino brothers, and sort of that was my world. And I have to say something. I name this because I've seen the marked difference, right, between a white Australian male versus the Latino males that I've been with, throughout the majority of my life. one thing that he brings to me that I would, sort of give advice to other men, particularly Latino men,
Yeah.
right? Um, because Latino men are oftentimes, because of, are given special treatment in society in Latin
Yeah.
America, and they
Totally.
are mimados,
Yeah.
and given special permission to do things, right? Culturally and socially. We come from a very sexual society too, where where men are sexualized and women are even more so sexualized, and there's this expectation to please the men, and for men, to uh and a pressure for men to also please the woman, right? And to so I would say, trust yourself, trust your instincts, be grounded in your heart when treating strong women or
Yeah.
people or partners that you're with, because what is going at the essence of everything, at least in my relationship with Tony, that he has brought, is peace.
So beautiful.
Safety and peace, right? Knowing that someone's going to be there for trusting and knowing that um, that the other is the person who is going to carry you and be happy for your successes, and not be threatened by your successes, or wants to see you shine and be the best that you can be. And with Latino men, not all but many in my experience are very threatened by strong women, and can really, and you don't have to be,
Yeah.
for you don't have to be, because the more, she will be a reflection of you, and you will be a reflection of her, because you will help each other shine. And
Amen.
that is the beauty. So there's nothing to be threatened by. It's the other way around. There's nothing to be jealous by. There's nothing, you don't need to be jealous if she has 5 guy friends.
Right.
It'll make her stronger. It'll make her bigger. It'll make her more wonderful. It'll make her more whole, to
Yeah.
be free. And
Yeah.
that is,
Yeah.
that's what I would say.
Gold. Another one that gave me goosebumps. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Yeah.
thank you, thank you. Beautiful stuff.
Thank
And
you.
very real about some of the cultural tropes. I was translating one of Bad Bunny's most recent super popular songs. Titi me preguntó, and she's like, what
Yeah.
does it mean? And I'm like, no, literally, as boys, we are asked by the people around us, our aunts, female aunts, like, how many girlfriends do you have? Not do you have a girlfriend, but
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
many? That's literally what we're being asked. That's
Yeah.
boys. I was asked so much. So, like, why should you not think that you shouldn't have many girlfriends? Like, that's what your aunt is telling you. It's a whole thing. It's a
Yeah.
whole, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
By the way,
Uh,
I have to say about, I want to go back to one thing about, particularly Puerto Rican men. Uh, and it's this, Gibran: Puerto Rican men are special.
mm,
You're special. And I have 2 brothers, and I have uncles, and I know a lot of wonderful, amazing, brilliant Puerto Rican men who are just giving so much to the world. And I want to give a special shout out to the Puerto Rican men, because many of them have shaped my life in very beautiful ways, right? And have been incredibly influential in who I am today. I'm thinking of Jaime Rodriguez, for
no,
example, right? And
yes,
and others, who you who but I want to say to those Puerto Rican men out there, particularly the ones that have been in my life, be be that be the person that makes, that identifies and lifts up other Puerto Rican women.
that's fantastic.
It's you have to. It's your responsibility. You
That's
have to identify and proactively seek out those Puerto Rican women, because we need you, all of us,
true.
particularly as Puerto Rican. We need you to be there for us, to lift us up and lift us up and allow us to be who we are. So I just want to
Thank
make
you.
that sure for the Puerto Rican men out there who are listening.
Yes.
We need you. We need you.
Yeah, that's so good. That is so good. In fact, when this podcast is released, I will send it especially to Puerto Rican guys in my life. Let me ask you: do you have a just a couple minutes, or do you have to hop off right
No, no,
now?
I have a couple of minutes. Yeah.
Okay, just to close well. Um, I just wanted to say you brought your brothers up again, and there was something in what you said about what you learned, and I wanted to affirm it. And it's such an important part of my own learning. And I think it's an important thing for learning to be a human being. So my father's oldest brother died in a tragically in his 30s in a car accident. I was must have been like 5 years old, and I always thought of it as something that happened that I was too young to contend with. That I did, you know what I mean? Like I didn't think of the impact it had in my life
Yeah.
until like literally like a couple of years ago in therapy.
Yeah.
Like seeing my grandmother writhing in bed in the worst of languages, right? Like the worst thing that can happen to a human being, I feel, is like losing your child. And I learned that I was confronted with the tragedy of human existence.
See.
And in some ways, it made me this beautiful, like, thirst for life that I have. But it also made me believe, I think, a, a little bit akin to what you're saying, that somehow if I meditated enough, or I did enough exercise, or I ate well enough, or was kind enough, or somehow I would be spared.
Yeah, that's how I exactly.
Right, right. And but then you have this other part of you that knows that you won't be, like a secret part, like a hidden part. And so I'm in a sobriety path, and one of the most important slogans is live life on life's terms.
See.
And these are the terms. Like, none of us will escape unscathed. Grief will come to us.
Yes.
And there's no goodness or no protection that is enough
Exactly.
for you to be spared.
Agreed.
And so, like, in that way, you little by little release the deepest of fears and accept the terms, and then live the life that you have, you know? And
Yes.
I just wanted to affirm that realization, share how
Beautiful.
it's an
It's
unfolding truth for me, you know.
it's beautiful, and I share
Yeah,
it. I
yeah,
I agree wholeheartedly.
yeah,
Wholeheartedly.
yeah, yeah,
Death is something, especially, is something that is it's a strange thing, because with the same time that my brother died, a few months later I had my first daughter.
wow,
And so death and life come together in
yeah,
a way that what it made me do was you know grief, in that sense, makes you more just aware and appreciative. And like you said, I think I love that about living life in life's term, because
yeah,
that's exactly it. It's about an understanding, okay, something that has died, but something is living at the same time.
yeah,
It's There's new life now, and
yeah,
appreciating that
yeah,
is important.
yeah. That's it. That's it. I will let you go. Is there anything else you want to say or tell us? We'll write in the show notes how to find you and follow you. But is there anything that you feel has been left unsaid that you want to?
No, I just want to thank you, Gibran. This is like full circle for me with you. It's been wonderful, and thank you for your being so gracious and so generous in inviting me to this. We have a long history, and I'm just very
Yeah,
happy that we've been able to you know close the circle here, and not close it, but just have a circle here that's beautiful
yeah,
and wonderful.
yeah,
So thank you. And I'm so
yeah.
proud of you. I'm
Thank
so
you.
proud of you
Yeah,
and what you've done with your life, and who you've become. And I
yeah.
applaud everything that you're giving to the world. So thank you.
Yeah, the appreciation is absolutely mutual. I'm absolutely proud of you. I have a whole lot of love for you, and I can't wait for our
Mhm.
old friends
Yes.
to be exposed to this one. Again, I'll reach out to them more directly. I'll
All
be like,
right.
"Hey, find out more about how Giovanna's doing," you know.
Excellent. Thank
So
you.
I'm looking forward to it. And don't come to Boston without checking on me.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
Take
Un
care, Gina.
abrazote. Mwah.
Gracias.
Have a
Ciao,
great weekend.
ciao.
Adios.
Okay. You too.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Signal versus noise. There's so much competing for our attention. And I am so glad that you stayed with us through the end of the podcast. It should mean that you're finding something meaningful here. Hopefully, something worth sharing. And so I'm asking again that you think of somebody who would be touched by this conversation, who wants to be a part of it some way. It is a decentralized conversation. It is a way in which we're changing ourselves by leaning in towards each other in places like this and in the exchange of these ideas. So, who's a person or two that will be specially moved by what you've heard here today? Send them a text, an email. Let them know we're here. We're not trying to reach everybody, but we want to reach the right people. We want to keep having this decentralized conversation. We want to keep working on getting right to the edge of the evolution of consciousness and culture to see what we find here together. Thank you again for being a part of this. Liking the podcast helps. Subscribing is definitely a good thing. Feedback is always welcomed. Stay in touch.